Earlier, Peter predicted Russian oil exports would be nil by now due to a loss of Western parts and technology, an inability to export what it pumps fast enough to maintain pipe flow. Yet oil flows on. How is that possible?
So the specifics of the forecast is that we were going to have a disruption either due to war or to the sanctions that were going to force the Russians to basically export less. And as pressure builds up in the pipe back to the permafrost, that the wells themselves would freeze shut because the water that comes as a byproduct would freeze within the pipes and bust them from the inside. The reason that hasn't happened is that original pulse that slowed the exports was not sufficient in size. The Russians were able to shut in wells in non-permafrost zones, specifically Tatarstan and Bashkiristan. And so they only shut in about 1 million barrels a day for about 6 to 8 weeks, and then were able to kick that back up again. I would argue that this is still going to happen. It's just going to take a little bit longer. The specific issue to watch for is on January 1, the sanctions regime on maritime insurance expands from any Russian flagged vessel to any vessel carrying any Russian cargo. That combined with the oil price cap that the Europeans are about to adopt is probably going to lock in at least 2 or 3 million barrels a day, and that's more than enough to cause that pump freeze. And once that happens, that stuff is offline for decades.
Okay. Next question. Do you think Iran is going to escalate the drone attacks on the Persian Gulf? And if so, how soon? This actually opens up a whole area because...
Oh, yeah. It's like there's a whole sense there.
Well, warfare, robotics. We don't staff wars with lots of young men, perhaps because we don't have them, perhaps because they don't want to fight. But war has become cyber, robotic, drone-based in the form of robots. Start with Iran and talk about the changing nature of warfare as you can.
Well, I would start saying that the Ukraine war is proving that boots in the mud are still absolutely critical. It's just that there's more pieces in motion right now, of which drones are part of the landscape. So don't write off Iran's ability to actually throw people at a problem here. However, I would argue that if we do get to the point where the Iranians feel this is a good idea, keep in mind that with the United States largely not present in the Gulf anymore, the onus will not be on the United States to do something. The onus will be on the Saudis to do something. And since the Saudis have the capacity to export crude to west to the Red Sea instead of having to go through Hormuz, the country here that's likely to lose a lot of its oil export capacity is Iran. So if they start playing that game in the absence of the United States, I have no doubt that the Saudi Arabians have the military capacity necessary to utterly destroy all Iranian oil export capacity.
Please discuss your views of the transformative influence of U.S.-driven technology developments on globalization. Let me tweak that a bit. Do you think the U.S. will have technology leadership 5 and 10 years out?
Like technology leadership compared to the rest of the world?
Well, that's what makes you a leader, I guess.
Okay, I just want to make sure that's where we were going. Yes. The bottom line is the American educational system is broadly okay. And while we are facing a financial crunch from the retirement of the baby boomers, we have a replacement generation coming in. So the volume of the capital that is available to pursue technological leads still exists, even if it's going to be constrained and more expensive. The bigger problem in the United States is that the millennials are aging out. And, the millennials are now entering their mid-40s. And you need a lot of people in their 20s who are unattached, who can network together with a lot of capital. That's how you get broad-based technological advancement. And we're losing pressure on both of those factors, but they're being obliterated everywhere else. So I would expect the overall pace of technological advancement globally to slow considerably. And the technologies that we do pursue are going to be ones that are pretty close to being operationalized and prototyped already. We're just not going to have the capacity to go for the broad base anymore. And we're already seeing that in Silicon Valley with the liquidation of a lot of the staffs at most of these big tech companies. But compared to everyone else, we're still by far the tallest of the midgets, if you will. And the millennial class in the United States is larger than the millennial class in the rest of the free world combined. And even though the boomers are retiring, we have the least distorted demographic structure of all of the free world. And so we will still have more capital available. So a slower pace, fewer breakthroughs, less broad-based progress, but it's all going to be concentrated here.